Hello and welcome to Season 14, Episode 8 of Solely Singleton. I'm your host, Brad. This is my co-host, Eric.
How's it going?
We're here in front of a live audience of patrons to talk about magic cards. At least we're actually excited for this set.
Yeah, this is the continuation of New Capenna, but this is actually like an interesting one.
This is where they hit all the fun cards.
Yeah, we're talking about the commander set for it.
Yes, so this is NCC New Capenna Commander, I assume. I don't know how they're actually naming these sets. I've never bothered to learn, and I never will, so don't even bother sending us the correction.
I feel like they don't know either until they need to know, and there's like pick 3 random letters.
Alright, but that's enough. Let's get into this thing.
Sounds good. Alright, you want to start boringly in white, or do we want to spice it up and go with green?
Well, obviously, we start off with universes within, universes close, universes, oops, we made a big fucky wucky.
Universe's secret lair in Magic?
Yeah. So let's talk about these shitty secret layery cards, even though I shouldn't. But these cards are actually pretty cool, so I want to talk about them, and apparently they are on the list, so they can appear in normal Magic sets. I googled it, so I guess they're valid Magic cards now, and we'll talk about them.
Yeah, and one of them's even Boros, which, yay, Boros card that isn't boring and trash.
So start us off with it, Eric.
Okay, we've got Safina Spear Sage Deserter, which is 2 red-white for a 4/4 legendary human soldier with menace. Whenever Safina Spear Sage Deserter attacks, investigate once for each non-token attacking creature.
Go ahead, read the last line.
It also has Friends Forever.
I fucking hate that line of text. I hate that that's not an uncard thing.
It feels very uncard.
If you showed me this card without the word Friends Forever on it, I would be ecstatic. It's amazing looking. It looks like a fun, high-end card for your Boros aggro deck, maybe. Excellent card for mid-range decks in Boros. I really want to actually try this card out. I'm hoping it's going to end up being kind of cheap so I can put it in every budget cube, because Boros is awful in budget cubes. There's nothing interesting you can do.
That might be tough given the limited availability of them, but hopefully in the future maybe. But yeah, I mean, base stats 4/4 menace for 4 is like, that's solid. And like,
the Investigate's dirty.
Being aggressive to get investigates, yeah, let's do it, man. That's fun. It feels good, and it's actually reasonably powerful.
Yeah.
So
in an aggro deck, when you're trying to finish off the game, you're in top deck mode. Mana is easy. You can crack clues all day. If you've got a pair of creatures swinging, you're making tokens, then you can just pop them immediately, draw more cards, or pop them at your opponent's end step, whatever, you get the point. Draw more cards, see more of your deck, find the burn spells to actually end the game with, or more creatures, whatever.
And like, same thing, like if you're in a mid-range kind of deck, then like you're just trying to grind value, and like having more options and draw is good. This actually feels like it's going to play very well in most Boros decks. So just Sharpie the Friends Forever, so you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
And being annoying. So not many cards in this universe thing either. I think there was 9, but there is one other one that I want to talk about, and it's a land.
Okay, read it to us.
We've got Haven Ghoul Laboratory, which is a legendary land, taps to add colorless. You can pay 4, tap it to investigate. And then it's got a bunch of shit about end step, sacking 3 clues to transform it into whatever, but that doesn't mean anything because like it'll never happen. And it's not a powerful effect on the backside anyways. But I do actually think that 4 tap to investigate is a reasonable colorless land for utility. It's making it so that you have card advantage on a land, but it's splitting up the cost, and it's also giving you an artifact. I think the other one that we've had before was the 5 tap, but you have to have City's Blessing.
Yes. And I think I like this better.
That was fine, but yeah, I think I like this better as well.
I still can't say I think this is going to be a top tier land.
No.
I would try it, especially because I like the artifact deck, and this does make an artifact token by being a clue. I can't say it looks like the strongest thing.
The fact that you can do the card draw like later on and investment kind of strategies is interesting. But yeah, I mean, it's a colorless land. There's only so many of those spots, and there's some other ones out there that do more. But I just wanted to give a shout out to Havengood Laboratory because I do think it's pretty decent.
All right, I guess we can actually talk about the set we told people we would be here talking about. All right, so first up, let's just go in Wooburg order. I'll start things off with Contractual Safeguard, which is 2 and a white for an instant with addendum. If you cast the spell during your main phase, put a shield counter on a creature you control, and then it has choose a kind of counter on a creature you control, put a counter of that kind on each other creature you control. A kind of counter also broke my brain as a phrase, but that's fine.
Because we have more counter types. We've got like vigilance counters and stuff like that now. So
yeah, I will get this out of the way. Normally we do like a forward where we talk about this type of stuff. There is a good amount of counters matter support in this set. I'm not going to bring up every card for that. There's a couple of them that I think just look good in general that I will bring up. But if you're looking into doing a Counters Matters theme, I would look through this set for quite a few cute new cards to play with.
That said, this one is kind of interesting just because of the addendum to me.
It's the only reason to look at it. The base case is good enough by being essentially your creatures get 1 round of indestructibility to swing in with. It's an Alpha Strike card. We've had plenty before. This one interests me because of shield counters lasting longer than like your creatures are indestructible and +1/+1.
Right. Like if they don't actually destroy it, it still is there. Like the shield counter is still there for until they deal with it.
Yeah, something that was brought up after Hot Takes last week is I misevaluated shield counters at one point. Dealing any amount of damage to the card causes the shield counter to break, not just lethal damage like with Totem Armor.
Right.
I was aware of that before the show, but I had completely blanked on it when I actually read it off for the show, so I evaluated it with it just being like a Totem Armor style on destruction thing. Shield counters are much worse because of that. I still don't think this card is good enough for just a generic cube that doesn't have a reason to run this, but it's one of the better cards with the Counters Matters type stuff going on, so I really wanted to throw it in there just so we could talk about that.
This is honestly one that I'm disappointed that they don't have uncommon rarity in these sets, because I think this would go well in like Christian's cube, just because he's got that like white counters kind of deck and it's like taking advantage of it, but it's rare, so it doesn't happen. It's, I guess, a neat card, but not for everybody.
Speaking of a card with much more universal appeal, take it away, Eric.
Yeah, this is Grand Crescendo. X white for an instant. Create X/1/1 green and white citizen creature tokens. Creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. This is really efficient.
Yeah, so obviously the card that this is going to get compared to is Secure the Waste. I have never been a big fan of Secure the Waste.
Yeah, I liked Secure the Waste decently, and I still kind of accept that it's decent.
I run it still. It's still an okay card. I'm just not a fan of it. This card, on the other hand, because it's got the 2-drop, just your creatures are indestructible mode, this kind of does Contractual Safeguards job, but better.
But better.
At least for general cubes. I'm aware. I really wanted to bring up Safeguard for the Counters Matter stuff.
It's its own thing. It's a unique style card, and that's neat. But Grand Crescendo is just a good card. Yeah,
and I really like the instant speed protection mode attached to what is a pretty decent rate for a Expel token generation.
Yep.
Instant speed is super key on this, obviously. Being able to drop down indestructible tokens when your opponent thinks they're swinging in for an advantage, then cracking back, or mid-combat using it to screw up combat math and drop in value tokens, whatever the case may be. Both of those are great.
There's a lot of, it's sort of like combat tricks, but it's like the way that it exists, it just screws with combat math. It's not really like the trick of like, oh, giant growth, but it messes with the game plan of the math in that combat.
Yeah.
It's its own thing. It's a unique style card, and that's neat. But Grand Crescendo is just a good card.
And everyone is always looking to get combat tricks into cubes, so why not do it with a card that looks just fantastic?
Right. Yeah, Grand Crescendo just seems like a good card, honestly.
All right, so up next, we've got one that isn't going to be for everybody. This is Skyboon Evangelist, which is 4 and a white for a 3/3 creature bird advisor. It has flying, and when Skyboon Evangelist enters the battlefield, support 6. Since no one remembers that shitty ability, support 6 means put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 6 other target creatures. And it has, whenever a creature with a counter on it attacks one of your opponents, that creature gains flying until end of turn.
I don't really know about this. Like, I hate support. Like, it just feels so bad. And, like, support 6 doesn't.
Support is super low power, but the problem is, like, support was just on bad cards in BFZ.
It's true.
This, on the other hand, looks to be decent for budget cubes. I'm assuming this is going to be a 5-cent card. I'm comparing it to other budget cube cards.
Okay.
I do like the fact that if you're in a lower power setting or a budget cube or whatever, this is a non-embarrassing card and downright good if you're running tokens as a theme in White X. You can think of it as up to 6 other creatures get to crack through your opponent's defenses at +1. Like, this is going to do a lot of damage.
So you're kind of thinking of it like the Angel of Invention style thing where it's like, make things bigger.
Yeah, it'll sit right next to like Cloud Goat, Angel of Invention, all of those other 5-drop good white tokeny creatures.
Okay.
This one is a payoff for the tokens, not generating the tokens.
Right, giving things flying.
And it ties well into +1/+1 counters, which, again, as we just talked about, the whole counter thing might actually be much more playable after this set, especially in lower power settings.
Yeah, I mean, that's possible. I don't think this is powerful enough for normal general cubes, but I could see this being interesting for the right power. I do feel like it's going to suck when you only have like 3 other creatures and you support 6.
3 other creatures sounds okay. The problem is, in a vacuum, it's a 3/3 flyer.
It sounds fine, and like, I just hate seeing support 6 and you can't, like, you only have 3 options. You know? It feels like such a fucking waste.
Support should not have had a number after it. That was a whole...
Yeah.
It was terribly made. It should have just said support, which is just put a +1/+1 counter on everything.
Yeah. It just feels so bad to me. And that's partially why I hate support. But yeah, I could see Skyboon Evangelist working out some cubes.
Like, you're not going to have 7 other creatures in play. That's board white bait.
Yeah.
So, realistically, this just says, when it enters, put a +1/+1 counter on everything else.
Right.
And when you read the card like that, it has a bad worst-case scenario of being a 3/3 flyer. But in a tokeny deck, this would have a very good average case that will probably end the game a lot of the time.
Right, which is nice. So, we can move on to Benny Brack's Zoologist is 3 and a white for a 3/2 legendary elf druid with Convoke. And at the beginning of each end step, if you created a token this turn, draw a card. I have trouble actually figuring out how good this is, because drawing cards is great, right? Like, that's strong. Making tokens isn't too difficult in Cube. But this is a 4-drop 3/2, but it's got Convoke.
No, obviously this is only going to get played if you support tokens in your cube, which I think is a pretty common thing to be supporting in a White X archetype.
I mean, honestly, even if you're not like pushing tokens, there's just a lot of incidental tokens on like any of the white planeswalkers make tokens.
Sure.
Planeswalkers in general generally make tokens.
Solid way to look at it, and it's going to be rare that you pay all 4 mana for this guy.
Right.
Like, if you've got some 1/1s laying around, you might as well make him cheaper unless you have no reason to do so, in which case, I guess, sure, ham fist him out there.
Yeah. It's pretty brittle of just being 2 toughness, of like, dice to a swift breeze. But I don't know you care that much.
Yeah, that is a slight downside, but to be honest, we're only really comparing it to, like, the 3 drops that tend to make you draw cards when a creature enters. There's been, like, 3 of them, and they're all very mediocre.
It's like Bygone Bishop and
the other ones that are worse.
Yeah. Well, there was one that just came out.
Welcoming Vampire, maybe? The one that our lovely patrons just pointed out?
Yes, that's exactly what it was.
So how does it compare to Welcoming Vampire?
So Welcoming Vampire being a 3-drop, 2 and a white for a 2/3 flyer, and then whenever one or more creatures with power 2 or less enter the battlefield under your control, draw a card. It only triggers once each turn, which Benny Brax also only triggers once each turn because it's just at the end step, draw a card. But it's just make a token, so it doesn't have to be a token creature.
That's loose. You know it.
It is loose. That is loose.
The Convoke cost is the real thing here for me.
The Convoke is why I'm interested, and I don't know. And I like Welcoming Vampire.
I knew about it for sure. It was a real Magic card that I was aware of.
Yeah. I don't know. I think Benny Brax is interesting, and if you have interest in that kind of tokeny style thing, give it a shot. I'd love to hear how it actually plays out, but I think it'll be decent enough. It'll be non-embarrassing.
All right, let's move into blue, Eric. I'll start us off with In Too Deep, which is blue for an enchantment aura. It has split second. It has enchant creature, planeswalker, or clue. Enchanted permanent is a colorless clue artifact with 2, sacrifice this artifact, draw a card, and loses all other abilities.
I love that you can enchant a clue.
A clue. It has to have it so it doesn't fall off, but
I just love thinking about that play.
Yeah, it's like enchant a creature in a graveyard or a creature on Animate Dead.
Yeah. It makes sense, but it's just so funny. So I actually kind of like this card. You brought it up similar to Imprisoned in the Moon, I believe is what it was.
Yes, which I think this is about on par with Imprisoned in the Moon. So that's an extra mana, but it only requires a single blue. You can hit more than creatures and planeswalkers with it. It gives them a colorless land, quote unquote, whereas this one gives them a clue token. I'm not a huge fan of Imprisoned in the Moon. I feel like this is pretty similar.
The thing is I think 2 versus 3 actually matters a good amount. And I don't know if blue is that big of a deal. It's probably, I don't think In Too Deep is going to be just a generically good card for cubes, but I think it'll play decently. And I do like having these kind of effects where it's like it turns it into something from blue. It's a nice way of removal for me, in my opinion. But yeah, In Too Deep's probably not an all-star just because blue is not nothing.
Yeah.
I don't think split second really matters that much. I mean, it does cut off, like, in response, I'll tap my mom or whatever.
Sure, right? I guess.
It does shut certain things off, but I don't think that's that big of a deal.
No, I'm far more interested in at least one other blue card in this set. So let's move on to Shield Broker, Eric.
All right. Shield Broker is 3 blue for a 3/4 Cephalid Advisor. When Shield Broker enters the battlefield, put a shield counter on target non-commander creature you don't control. You gain control of that creature for as long as it has a shield counter on it.
So this is the exact card where it was brought up to me that I had misevaluated shield counters because I kept forgetting the dealt damage portion.
Right.
And I think this card is not going to play well because of that exact problem. If it was just up until destruction, this would be very strong. You'd be able to steal someone's creature and then take advantage of it till it dies, then they get it back, I guess. This guy is unrelated to that.
I don't think it's nothing, though. Like, it's still...
He's still a 3/4 for 5, which is fine.
3/4 for 5 that's mind controlling something. And if you just don't get that thing in combat, then they have to waste their removal spell on it.
But if you're not getting in combat, you just using this as a really bad removal spell.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, unless it's something that is just a utility creature. You're taking advantage of the utility-ness.
Sure. But at a certain point, then it's just a bigger fiend hunter.
Yes, kind of.
I know, it's really weird to think of compared to that, but I'm saying if you're not doing combat with it.
Right. Though, I mean, even if you ignore that and you're just okay, I'll take something and I'll get in combat and whatever. If you're taking something big, even if they chump block, you're still killing something with that and forcing them to make that decision. I don't know, dude. I don't think Shield Broker's that good, to be honest. I think it'll be fine in lower powers.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about it outside of like a budget setting or a lower power cube. This is one of the cards that kind of show how much I wish they would have remembered that they can print things at uncommon and commander sets. Because I bet this would have been a way more interesting thing to have Christian look at.
I do like the fact of the mind control, but
Soft.
There's a way to get it back for the lower power things. Because like those type of mind control effects just feel bad for some players. And if it's like, oh, here's a way to get it back and it's not too difficult, you don't have to jump through too many hoops, that's cool. But yeah, I mean, hopefully Shield Broker's cheap because it could work in that kind of stuff. But we've got one more blue card, Brad, and this one seems pretty neat. You want to take it?
This may have been the card I was alluding to.
Yeah.
Sinister Concierge is 1 in a blue for a 2/1 creature human wizard, the most common type. When Sinister Concierge dies, you may exile it and put 3 time counters on it. If you do, exile up to 1 target creature and put 3 time counters on it. Each card exiled this way that doesn't have suspend gains suspend.
I like this card a lot.
Yeah, so it seems good in tempo. It seems solid in control. Like, thinking about it, in your average board state against control, they got like a 3/1 first strike or something and a 2/2.
Yeah.
You trade with the 2/2. You exile the 3/1 for 3 turns until it's going to be way less relevant.
Yep.
Then this comes back to block again.
And like the second time this comes back, it can block something bigger and take that out. Like you get the option then to take something else different. The thing is like, so when we look at cards like this, because I'm generally the aggressive drafter for Cube, I always think like, how much would I hate them playing this card? I would hate it quite a bit. If like I was like Goblin Guide and then you play Sinister Concierge and it's like, fuck you.
Just in the other direction, this is obnoxious. You're playing against a tempo deck and they're swinging with this thing.
Yeah.
You don't want to eating your 4/4 for the rest of the game.
Right. That's true. I don't know if I'd put this in an aggro deck or an aggressive slant kind of thing. The tempo, it would be a slower.
It's blue. I don't care. Realistically, fuck it.
Yeah. So that's fine. But I think Sinister Concierge is like actually a really good card.
Yeah. It's going to be good in basically the archetypes you want to be playing in blue.
Right.
Like if you're slow, it's fantastic on defense. If you're tempo oriented, it's a tempo oriented card.
Yeah, I mean, there's not too much there. It does have competition at 2 in blue for creatures. Like, there are decent ones there, but that's fine.
I've heard of 1 or 2 blue 2-drops in Magic history.
Yeah, but it's fine. Like, not everybody's going to play Sinister Concierge, but it's good enough to be in debate.
All right, Eric, it's time for us to head into black.
Yeah, this is Dogged Detective. 1 and a black for a 2/1 human rogue. When Dogged Detective enters the battlefield, surveil 2. Whenever an opponent draws their second card each turn, you may return Dogged Detective from your graveyard to your hand. This is not the most powerful card by any means, but I think it'll play a solid role filler in your 2-drop black section.
So Mire Triton is immediately the card I think of, which is a hole filler card that I added to my cube that has done solid work. It's a 2/1 death touch for 2 that when it ETBs, you mill 2 and then gain 2 life. It just plays well into all of the black archetypes. This does a very similar thing without the death touch, but you get surveil instead.
And it's not impossible that it comes back.
That's true. There's many types of decks where drawing 2 cards in a turn is not unheard of by any means, so you may see this again.
Yeah, and it's a 2-drop, so it's low, so you can play it for just the surveil effect later on in the game to just help smooth out that. Well, yeah, I mean, it's not the most powerful, but I think it'll do very well, similar to Mire Triton, where, like, you're not going to be disappointed to have this in your deck. It's just going to fill. It's good to have some of those options in Cube. I don't know which one I would rather have, though, out of Mire Triton or Dogged Detective.
So it kind of speaks more for how great Mire Triton is, but I'd say it's up to you. They both seem fine.
Yeah, it really seems like they're filling the same kind of thing, and you just use whichever.
For the standard uncommon, A+ that you get to stick in there with a rare that has recursion attached to it as a, you know, you might be fine compared to it.
Yeah. Speaking of comparing things.
So up next is Lethal Scheme. Lethal Scheme is 2 black for an instant with Convoke, and destroy a target creature or planeswalker. Each creature that convoked Lethal Scheme connives.
So this is an interesting card because it's a 4-drop kill spell, which we've already proven can work with like Eat to Extinction and Vraska's Contempt.
Yes, I'm a big fan of both. And this goes a step beyond by having both Convoke and an upside for convoking it. Normally, convoking is a little bit annoying because when you convoke something, you're losing the value of the creature having to tap.
Right. Either aggressively or defensively, there's an opportunity cost to that.
Yeah, it's your normal like, ooh, I don't know if I want to tap 3/2 Menace or whatever because it's actually like a valid card. And then with this, you still get an upside on that creature.
Yeah, and like Connive's not nothing.
Connive is solid, especially on a creature that was already okay.
Right.
So you feel less bad about using the Convoke.
Right. I think Lethal Scheme's good.
It's probably the best 4-drop removal spell in black now.
Yeah. And I wonder how often it'll be convoked. I think it's going to be a decent amount of time that you'll convoke with one.
At least one, yeah. Just for the Connive value. Because Connive, you get to draw, discard, and maybe pump your creature. Like,
yeah, I think it's one of those, like, even if you have the mana, I think there'll be a decent number of times that you convoke for one, even if you didn't need to, just to get the loot and potentially grow it or whatever, but to get that loot.
So normally with like Eat to Extinction and stuff, I think of them for more the mid-range and control decks. But Lethal Scheme, I think it's safe to say, this is one that you're more interested in aggro.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm just trying to think of a board state right now and like looking at it, I'm like, even if I'm in like red-black aggro, I feel like in most of those decks, I'm totally fine with tapping 2 of my creatures to get rid of like Jace or whatever.
Yeah.
Tapping 2 of them, getting rid of this card from hand, then you'd get to draw, discard 2. You might get the +1/+1 counter, but more than anything, it's to shape your hand in a way where you're able to end the game with some reach.
Right. Either you need lands or you can find things that are not lands.
Yeah.
It's very polarizing in your aggressive decks of what you need, but because it's loot, you get to make the choice of like it goes into hand and then you can pitch something. It's not Surveil where you have to make the decision on that card. Thinking about it, this Lethal Scheme seems really good because even convoking 2, it goes down to a 2-drop, so you'd be comparing it to like Cast Down and stuff. But this Lethal Scheme still hits planeswalkers, so it still has that option instead of just being a kill spell. Yeah, dude, I'm all in. I like Lethal Scheme.
All right, so sorry, listeners, but there's no red cards to discuss because Eric's a spoil sport who had to read the card right. So I don't.
It was so close.
I don't get to talk about a card I thought was interesting. Instead,
it was a fantastic do nothing enchantment.
It was going to be very interesting to talk about until I read the card.
Yeah. Let's
move on to green, though, Eric.
This one's an interesting one, but it's just kind of like a shout out. So we've got Caldea Guardian. Are you supposed to say that? Is 3 and a green for a 4/3 human soldier. Whenever Caldea Guardian or another creature you control with mana value 4 or greater dies, create 2 1/1 green and white citizen creature tokens. It also has Blitz for 2 and a green.
And it's a 4/3.
Yeah. The only reason why I'm bringing this up is because that Blitz is a pretty aggressive card.
Yeah, I think this card kind of only has Blitz, which may be bad for it.
Yes.
I don't think I'm going to hardcast this thing.
There are probably times that it's a good idea, but this is primarily a Blitz card. Like, if you're hardcasting it, it's because of a specific reason.
Because you need the 4/3 to block with and just stall out a bit to hope to... But, like... Then I'm probably not the deck who picked this up in the first place.
You're in trouble. But most cubes, I don't think will want this because generally green section isn't really pushing the aggressive stuff and you're trying to do other things.
I still see this as a mid-rangey card, but on the aggressive slant, like Gruul.
Yes. I was just going to say, this seems like a fantastic card in those Gruul decks. Like, you swing in for a bunch, you get the draw, and you're making 2 tokens, so you're not getting like nothing out of it, and that's all for 3 mana.
Yeah, remembering that Blitz draws the card makes this very good then for 3 mana. So 3 mana, swing for 4. They probably just take the 4 rather than blocking, knowing it's going to die anyway, unless they can make a really solid block. Yeah.
If they've got a chump block, then whatever. Sure, whatever.
Then you still get 2 1/1s out of the deal and draw a card for your 3 mana after doing that.
Yep.
That seems very solid for a 3 mana card.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, if you're playing a more aggressive slant in your green section, like with like a mid-rangey Gruul deck where you're playing like hasty 3-2 something on turn 2 and that type of stuff, then I can definitely see this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you have to be in like the aggro green. You do have to support more aggressive styles in green other than just like, I'm going to ramp. Like, my green section is a ramp. But I think Kaldaya Guardian, it has a place in some cubes, which is cool. Brad, you want to take the next one? Because I think you're pretty interested in this.
This is also the my card of the set because it's Oscar the Grouch.
It is.
Really is. Didn't know I got my own magic card, yet here I am.
Yet here you are, and reclaiming rubbish.
Oscar Rubbish Reclaimer is 3 blue-black for a 3/3 legendary creature, human wizard. Oscar has this spell cost 1 less to cast for each different mana value among cards in your graveyard. And whenever you discard a non-land card, you may cast that card from your graveyard.
Neat.
So he gives everything you discard madness. He's often not a 5-drop. He's more realistically going to be a 4 or 3-drop. Sometimes he may be a 2-drop, but he's probably realistically a 4 or 3-drop 3/3.
I think you expect a 4 or 3. That's not too unreasonable.
Yeah, and in the cubes I'm thinking of using him in, which for my personal usage would be the budget cubes, because I can't really run ninjas anymore. Thanks, Watsy. And
yeah, it's a bit out of the budget.
And I can't run artifacts ever because they're way too expensive of an archetype.
No, not even close. Not even close.
I have found that looting and playing like a draw discardy deck in blue-black is something that you can do very easily in a budget cube, but it doesn't really have the payoffs I want. So I'm hoping this guy ends up cheap so I can use him for that. But if you're looking for doing something in your blue-black section to reward looting, then this guy is your man.
Yeah, like you said, I initially skipped over this because I was like, it's a Dimir card, and it's nothing good enough compared to what we have for ninjas or artifacts or just like good cards. But you do bring up an interesting cube, and I'm in for that.
So let's just set a board state. You're playing a blue-black control deck against generic Gruul deck, right?
Yeah.
You've played him out. He was cheaper because you've got a Merfolk Looter in play. Played him out.
Sure, okay.
Next turn, we're past all this, so he's on board. You can now, when your opponent casts a spell, use your Looter, draw, discard a counterspell, and use the counterspell, making your Looter now just tap draw a card.
Yeah.
Because you're just casting the counterspell that you had in hand.
Right.
I think he's solid enough to be arguable, especially if it's often going to be a 3/3 for 3 in that type of deck.
I think it really does matter how much you're supporting looting. Like, if it's just 2 or 3 looters in your cube.
No, it has to be something that you're supporting.
Yeah. But if you're supporting it to the point that you're like, realistically, I'm going to have a loot thing in this deck, and it's going to be on board reasonably often. Yeah, that sounds good, dude. It's just like free card draw, which is exactly kind of what you want in Dimir colors. So,
and again, I don't think that's going to be the strongest thing you can do, but I do really like it for lower power settings, and I'm really hoping I can use it in the budget cubes.
Yeah. And I mean, it's definitely a fun effect. Like, it's the kind of effect that feels like you're taking advantage of something, and I like that.
All right, Eric, let's get rich and move into colorless.
Hell yeah, dude. We're going to convert some currency. We've got Currency Converter, which is a single mana for an artifact. Whenever you discard a card, you may exile that card from your graveyard. You can pay 2 and tap to draw a card to then discard a card. And you can tap to put a card exiled with currency converter into your graveyard. If it's a land card, create a treasure token. If it's a non-land card, create a 2/2 black rogue creature token.
Again, this works well into that Oscar deck I was talking about, although, because this is a colorless 1-drop artifact that may have some combo potential at some point in Legacy, then it may end up randomly being $10, so it's probably not useful for me, but for someone who's just doing a lower power setting, not for budget reasons, they may be very interested in this.
And I do kind of like the card. Like, I'm a sucker for those, like, do-nothings.
Especially a 1-drop. If you're going to have a do-nothing, a 1-drop is the correct point on the curve.
And, like, just having the loot effect, like, 2 is a bit much, but it's like, hey, whatever. You know, sometimes I'll have it around and I just want a card draw, or I want to increase the power of my hand by drawing and discarding. And, like, putting the exiled card into your graveyard is neat.
I actually think that's one of the weaker parts of this, because you're not letting the card go automatically to the yard. That's the only downside.
Exactly. It's tough because in those decks, you're trying to really take advantage of that, right?
Yeah, if you're playing like Reanimator, it's probably still okay because you can just tap this to get the one card you care about. But there will be awkward times where this gets blown up somehow and something you need was still in exile, and you wish it had just gone to the yard and gotten you normal replayability value. Though this does have you may exile, actually. Now that I reread the card, hot takes as we speak, you may exile. So if it's not to your advantage, you probably didn't exile it in the first place. If it's something like playing Deep Anal.
Right.
Then
yeah, there's definitely some things that you're just like, no, I don't. I'd rather have this in the yard than have any chance. But, I mean, having a treasure token or a 2/2 at instant speed, there's some power to that. Like, it takes a bit of work to get this all together, but it's not nothing, really. Like, when you think about it all together, I think having just like a 2/2 come out of nowhere, or having the treasure token that they didn't think of because now you're up 1 on mana than what they'd expect.
Yeah, and you loot a lot more in cube than you think about it in control decks in particular. And just being able to pump out 2/2s pretty regularly, that seems solid. The treasure token is like a whatever to me.
I mean, it's a nice fail case, though.
Sure.
Because sometimes you're just like, I just need some color. Like, I need a black. And I've only got 1 black open in lands. You know?
Yeah.
Like, it happens. And I think that is actually a nice benefit. But yeah, just making 2/2s is solid for those kinds of decks. It's an interesting card. Currency Converter is interesting. Probably not an all-star, but definitely interesting.
All right, it's time for the final card, Eric.
And this is truly an all-star.
I'll let you take it. I know how much you love this card.
Okay, we've got Weathered Sentinels is 3 for a 2/5 artifact creature wall. It has Defender, Vigilance, Reach, and Trample. Weathered Sentinels can attack players who attacked you during their last turn as though it didn't have Defender. And whenever Weathered Sentinels attacks, it gets +3/+3 and gains Indestructible until end of turn. This card is really, really strong. Like, 3 mana for a 2/5 is a hell of a wall, right? Like, that's a good way to shut things down.
And it has Reach, it's
got Reach.
Not a 0 for a wall.
Exactly. And just in case they decide they want to attack you anyways, you just turn around and smack them in the face with a, 5/8 Vigilance Trample? Holy shit. And it's indestructible.
The 8 is really kind of weird to me because, like, it doesn't need it. It should have been plus...
It doesn't need it, but why not?
It should have been +3/+0 to turn it into a square 5/5. Just from a, like, card standpoint, it would have looked better.
Sure, but why not, dude?
Because the toughness doesn't matter because of the indestructible. But yeah.
This, like, Weathered Sentinels is just a good card. Like, anything that you're trying to slow the game down, this is good.
Yeah, how pissed would you be if I just, in a ramp deck, was just like, turn 1 mana dork, you don't kill it for whatever reason. Very unreasonable to expect that my mana dork lived to turn 2 against a aggro deck, but whatever.
It happens. Sometimes you try to put out the
Sure, you're going for Goblin Guide or something, whatever.
Yeah, it happens. And in those times that it happens, if you play a fucking Weathered Sentinel afterwards, holy fuck.
Turn 2 Weathered Sentinel hits play, and you're like, oh, all right.
I've made a grave mistake. Even if you have to wait until turn 3 because they keep cutting you off of it.
Sure. Normal control deck is totally happy playing this as their 3 drop.
It's so good. Because not only does it be a wall, it's also a wall that smacks them for being an idiot and attacking you anyways, which puts them on a clock.
Yeah, it means they can't value swing to get, 2 damage through. Because then you value swing for 5.
Right. And that 5 matters a lot because at a certain point you get down to basically nothing and you can't make the trades that you would normally make of oh, I've got enough life, I can take whatever it is and swing back. Yeah, Weathered Sentinels is just I think this card's very good.
All right, so that has been our review of NCC and whatever these non-Universe Beyond cards are going to be called. Universe Within.
I quite liked the Commander stuff. So we didn't bring it up because, we're primarily focusing on Q, but there was some neat Commander stuff for EDH that
oh yeah, this is a sweet Commander set. Actually Commander-wise.
Yeah, I'm yeah, there was some cool stuff there. So I know that the primary set I had troubles with and I didn't like.
Yeah, new Capenna is an irony where it's better as an EDH set than as an actual main set.
So I'm overall happy to have this Commander set to kind of cleanse the palate, as it were. And there were some solidly good cards for Cube as well, which is always nice.
All right, that does it for this week's episode. Thank you to our patrons for tuning in with us. For everyone else, let's get into this outro.
Sounds good.